Why I quit drinking in my 50s. Now, I was socialized to drink from a very young age because my parents drank. In fact, my entire family drank on my mom's side, not so much my dad's side. And I have mostly good memories, no raging drunks, alcoholics, or family fights, or any of the drama that you so often hear about. No DUIs, crashed cars, or any of that. What I remember most is that everything involved drinking: holidays, camping trips, picnics, lake trips, special events. There was always alcohol. Maybe this describes you too. In this video, I'm going to share my lifetime of drinking experiences, taking breaks, and then ultimately what led me to where I am today with alcohol. And I'll share my 3 questions that help me navigate any sticky situations with alcohol. I'm Jackie Ulmer, and I have a guide at throttlebackthebottle.com. You know me, I'm an airline person, so I use a lot of airline terminology, and it's really about rerouting your relationship with alcohol. Now, I want to say I'm coming to you in this video with no judgment, and I'm not here to tell you what to do. But if you're like me and have explored in your mind, or maybe in the dark secrets of the night, what it might be like to change your relationship with alcohol, I invite you to stay and listen in. To be honest, I have not completely given up alcohol, but I am very much a seldom drinker today and no longer drinking to excess as I was guilty of in the past. Now, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not in the gutter drunk or anything like that. And kind of like I shared about my own family stories, I don't have a history of creating a lot of drama. I haven't gotten myself involved in any crazy situations, no DUIs. I haven't lost friendships. None of that happened in my life. I just knew that as I began to age and began to look around at a lot of different things in my life, I started to ask myself if alcohol was truly serving me and truly serving my higher self, my future self. So today, really and truly, when I do choose to drink, 2 is my limit. But every day, one of the things that I do when I'm faced with the idea of drinking is I repeat to myself the mantra, alcohol is poison. Now, whether or not you choose to believe that or not is totally up to you. But I know for me, it helps me a lot to decide, am I going to indulge in some poison today, or am I going to step away from it? And it helps remind me that ultimately, it's my goal to move entirely away from alcohol. So here's where I was in my life when I began to cut back. January of 2020, we all know that year, it lives in infamy, but in January of 2020, I was introduced, or actually that December prior, to the concept of dryuary, which was something that started in the UK for people to take a break from drinking for the month of January. And I was all in. I told all my neighbors, I invited people to participate with me. A few people did, most didn't, but I started down the path in January of 2020 of doing dryuary. And I made it exactly 10 days before my first epic fail on a trip to Nashville to visit our daughter. I won't get into all the specifics of that, but she told us some things that had been going on for her that just literally created huge anxiety for me and caused me, instead of dealing with it with my rational, logical mind, it caused me to want to numb out from feeling those feelings, and I reached for the bottle. I drank for 4 days, not 4 days straight, not like I was a drunk for 4 days, but I drank every one of the 4 days after that. And then I picked back up. And it was kind of funny because at first I thought, oh man, I'm a huge failure. But I chose, even during that time frame, to look at the 27 days that I did make it without alcohol that January. I chose to look at that as the positive and the 4 days as a learning experience for me. Then, of course, we all know what happened in March of 2020, the great lockdown, shutdown, the whole world changed. And what I found is I started drinking more. My husband and I sat around. There was nothing else to do. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. The liquor stores were certainly open. And we started drinking earlier in the day. We started doing a whole lot more day drinking, hanging out in our swimming pool with cocktails, binge watching Netflix, and a lot of different things. And it was kind of one of those things where I realized I wasn't happy with the direction that it was going, because I would get up the next day and we couldn't always remember what the last episode of Nurse Jackie, which was actually what we were watching on Netflix during that time. We would often have to go back and repeat the prior episode to refresh both of our memories. And I remember thinking then, this is not a good thing. This is not healthy. And then one afternoon, this was in June, I believe, June of 2020, I was sitting outside. We were sitting outside having wine, and I had finished up the white wine, and I knew there was a little bit of a bottle of red left in there, and I didn't really want red. My taste buds had started having a little bit of a change, and red wine was not settling super well with me, but I didn't want to open another bottle of white. And as you'll see in my episode, my video coming up on sunken costs, I decided to just finish off the red, suffer through it because it was already there. I had already spent the money and I wasn't going to open a new bottle of white. I poured it. I walked back outside to the pool. I took a couple of sips and it just did not taste good to me. And I thought to myself, what am I doing? What am I even doing drinking this just because it's there, because it's red wine, because if it doesn't get consumed today or tomorrow, it's going to go bad. I can't waste it, all those kind of things. So I remember walking in the kitchen, pouring it down the drain along with the rest of the bottle, throwing it away and saying to myself, that's it. I'm taking a break from alcohol. And I did. I did great. I quit for 6 weeks until the day that we left for the lake, our annual summer trip to my husband's family's lake house in Missouri, big, boating out on the lake, all of that, which is also akin to a drunk fest, just being honest. And I started drinking then, even though in the back of my mind, I was thinking, why do I feel like I have to drink just because I'm at the lake, just because it's what we've always done? And so that led me down the path of reevaluating, recommitting to dryuary every year after that. And then interestingly, in August of 22, I was visiting a friend in Cleveland, Ohio, and we weren't doing anything crazy. We were sitting around at night talking, having a couple glasses of wine. But I remember waking up the next morning after one of those evenings and not feeling super motivated to go out on my walk, which I wanted to walk her neighborhood. It was my first time staying with her. It was beautiful out. And I didn't feel like it. I just lacked the motivation. I wasn't hungover. It wasn't anything like that. I just didn't have the motivation to get up and get dressed and put my walking shoes on, even though I love to walk, or do any of that. I just wanted to lay around and be a vegetable. And that's when I stopped and thought long and hard, and I made a decision right then that I'm quitting. Now I'll come back to that story. What I realized as I was doing this thought process is one of the things with me is I could never stop at just one glass. And I often found that I powered through that first glass very, very quickly. Like it was one of those things where sometimes I'd be sitting around thinking, I'm the fastest one through my glass of wine. What is everybody going to think of me if I pour a second right away? And how come they've still got half a glass left? And what is wrong with me? Now, I could stop at 2 glasses, but for whatever reason, stopping at 1 was very challenging for me. I also had found, because I love to cook, I was kind of doing the Julia Child thing where it was like, well, I'm going to start cooking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon typically. And that's when I would open a bottle of wine, pour myself a glass, then often a second glass. Sometimes I would delay that second glass for dinner, but quite often I would have that third glass during dinner. And I realized that I had become a mindless drinker and not intentional. And I started asking myself, why is it that every time I start to cook, I feel like I have to have a glass of wine to go along with it? And I had reached the point where I had given no regard whatsoever to drinking alone. I would open that bottle of wine at 4, whether my husband was out he's a pilot out on a trip or whatever. I could be totally alone. Whereas used to be years ago, I would have never even thought about drinking alone. And I also had discovered, kind of like my dryuary in January of 2020, that I could be an anxiety drinker, that even though I wasn't consciously making that decision, I would reach for that glass of wine to calm my nerves. You ever said that? To relax me, to do all that kind of stuff. So here's quickly my history of drinking before I come back around to August of 2022 and what happened then. I took my first drink in 7th grade on a dare at a movie theater with a group of friends. And quite honestly, the gal who dared me, I was afraid of her. I was truly afraid of her. She was kind of known as the bully, and she dared me to take a little sip of vodka out of a glass baby food jar. And I did, and it tasted horrible. But I remember feeling really disappointed with myself that I didn't say no. And I remember also thinking it would be such a disappointment to my parents. Fast forward 3 grades later, I'm in 10th grade, and I'm the youngest in the group I'm running with. Not that it matters. None of them were legal. And I got introduced to the concept now in high school of going to parties. And I also realized how calming my nerves, again, with a little bit of alcohol, made it easier for me to fit in, to feel like I was one of the popular crowd, or to feel loose and conversational and like I could talk to people. Now, I will tell you, I'm very fortunate that I didn't allow any of that to get me into bad situations at such a young age, but it definitely became a way of life for me, and I became kind of the weekend warrior drinker. Then enter my 20s, I go into the airline industry, which the airline industry is definitely a drinking profession. It's a culture where there's a lot of alcohol involved in it. And a lot of that has to do, I believe, with the schedule, airline benefits, being able to hop on an airplane back in the day, especially when it wasn't hard to get upgraded to first class, where they took care of you. They knew you were an airline employee. You were one of the family. They took care of you. And sometimes even in coach, they would take care of you. So it was definitely a drinking culture. Then as I entered into my early parenting phase, I mentioned drinking alone. I never, ever drank alone in my early parenting stages, but we had our weekly cul-de-sac gatherings. I lived in a cul-de-sac, but this was my first time living in Phoenix. And every Friday night, we ordered pizza. The moms made margaritas. Sometimes the dads joined us. My husband, as a pilot, wasn't always home on Fridays. My other gal friend, whose husband was a firefighter, he wasn't always home, but most of the rest of them were. So it was a Friday night thing, and we partied a lot in those cul-de-sac days with young kids on their rollerblades and skateboards and bikes and all of that, and it was just a very safe environment. And then shortly after 9/11, we moved to California because of 9/11 and airlines and my husband being based in LA. And we moved to a small community. And that's when I really got engaged in the wine culture and much more drinking in homes, because there weren't a lot of great restaurants where I lived. And so we did a lot of cooking and entertaining with groups of friends. And I became very, very much a part of all of that. And we had a boat, drinking out on the lake. We belonged to a yacht club. That was a drinking culture. And I have mostly good memories of that. Like I say, I didn't end friendships, no DUIs, no car crashes, no major drama. But it's interesting that around the year 2016, looking back in my journals, that's when I can see where I started at the end of almost every year. I started writing as one of my goals for the next year, drink less alcohol. And I wasn't really even conscious of writing that in my journal. But when I started really thinking about rerouting my relationship with alcohol, again, you can go to throttlebackthebottle.com and you can grab my guide, which will help you explore some of this for yourself if it's something that you're thinking about. But that's when I first started asking myself questions, sometimes under the covers in the dead darkness of the night, thinking, I don't want anybody else to know. What does it mean about me that I'm even questioning my drinking? And I would go out to Google and I would do research. How much is too much drinking? Is it okay to drink every day? How do you know if you're an alcoholic? How can I drink less and still have fun? What will my friends and family say if I quit drinking? Can you relate? Now, most of these questions in my research led me to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, of course, which is the long-standing gold standard of how to stop drinking. Now, I'm not here to trash talk AA, and I've never been to a meeting, nor would I attend, because, like I said, I don't identify as an alcoholic. So it just never seemed like a fit to me. I've seen all the movies, and I didn't want to have to walk in and give my first name and my initial and say I'm an alcoholic, because I'm not. I just knew that my drinking habits and patterns were something that I wanted to shift. And as I share in my Throttle Back the Bottle series, around the same time, I found the genre of quit lit books and podcasts. Glennon Doyle, Holly Whitaker, Ann Dowsett Johnson, and specifically Annie Grace. Then I stumbled upon Andrew Huberman's podcast and his series on the science behind what alcohol truly does to your body and your brain, which is where the mantra came from: alcohol is poison. I believe Annie Grace started that too. And since then, I've heard Scott Adams, the podcaster, talking about that as well. And most of the books and podcasts that I found were a contrast to what I felt like AA was offering. And I will say I'm happy that I couldn't relate to most of the stories, even in the Quit Lit series, but it did help me with some questions, with some thinking and all of that. And the podcast probably helped the most because so often they contained interviews and stories of women that I could find myself among. They weren't all drinking 2 bottles of wine a night or, doing tequila shot chasers after, pouring brandy in their coffee each morning just to get going. And I'm not exaggerating this. This was the case with a number of the stories that I read in the Quit Lit books, as well as the podcast. But not all of them were like that. And there's no judgment here. People get to their own space in life based on what they've been dealt, what they've experienced. And I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback anyone for the choices that they've made. This is my life that I'm living. It's your life that you're living. And we have to make those decisions for ourselves. But I'm so grateful to these women who were willing to be brave, willing to come forward, willing to share their stories, overcome their challenges and the shame around alcohol or questioning it, and seek to help others. Now, it is kind of interesting. Alcohol is the only drug, and it is a legal drug. It's the only drug that we often have to justify when we want to cut back or quit. Our friends and family say, "Oh my gosh, you're fine. Why?" Most of my friends said that. I don't even understand why you'd want to quit drinking. It's not like you're a drunk, or it's not like you're obnoxious or any of that. But I just knew that it wasn't serving me. And I also know that, falling into the trap of comparing myself to others and thinking this isn't me wasn't ever going to serve me well. And had I looked at these women and judged them and not just been open to listening, and I focused only on comparing myself to women who are far worse than me, I might have continued to avoid addressing my own thoughts and challenges around alcohol use. So I did compare myself to others and think, what is my problem that I cannot stop at 1? I can stop at 2, but stopping at 1 was often a challenge for me. And I realized that the real key to understanding my own drinking, my own issues and questions is to go to work on my own thoughts and my motivations. So that's an idea for you as well. Do some thought work around your own thoughts and motivations behind why you drink. And boiled down to simplicity, we all do things based on one of 2 things. We're seeking pleasure or we're avoiding pain. And as far as alcohol goes, I had to really look at that and say, what true pleasure does it bring to my life? It does at the moment. I get it. The dopamine hit, like the, slowing down of your brain, feeling relaxed and, zen-like and all of that. But ultimately, I often found myself waking up the next day, not necessarily with the hangover, but with alcohol regrets. So I began to do some thought work on myself, and I made some decisions around my future self and my goals for the rest of my life. So I mentioned August of 22, I woke up and said, I'm done, at least for now. I wasn't planning that date. I just happened to pick that date. I woke, and I can't even think of what the date on the calendar was. I want to say August 18th, but I'm not positive. But I woke up and said, I'm done, at least for now. And I didn't count days. I didn't say forever. I didn't do anything that would make me feel restricted or make me feel like I had caged myself and I was going to struggle with this. I truly went day by day, just like they say in AA, right? And what I found about myself is that 6 p.m. on the clock was magical. If I could make it till 6 o'clock, if I could make it till 6 o'clock in the evening without a drink, I was fine. My desire to drink subsided. But 4 o'clock was the witching hour. That was my danger zone because that's when I would start dinner. So I began to mix things up for myself. I began to eat dinner earlier and get out of Dodge, go to the library, go to the grocery store, go do something that would prohibit me from being in a drinking environment. And that helped a lot. But I mentioned my 3 questions, and I developed 3 questions that I could stop and ask my logical brain to sort through. And these magical questions help me. Question number 1, why do I want to drink? Now that sounds goofy maybe to you, just because I do, but is it because I'm starting dinner? Is that a really good reason to want to drink? Is it because I want to numb out my emotions, calm myself down or whatever? Could I not do the same thing by taking a hot bath or going out for a walk in nature or journaling or something like that? So I really got in touch with my thoughts and feelings and motivations behind why do I want to drink? And then the second question that I asked was, will I drink? Will I drink? Because I could ask myself why I wanted to drink, but that didn't necessarily determine whether or not I was going to. So I would ask myself, will I drink? And then the third question was, how will I feel about that decision, yes or no, in the next hour, in the next 3 hours, and certainly the next morning? How am I going to feel about that decision? So that made a big deal for me. These questions have been so helpful in managing my mind. And I'm well aware that my primitive brain, right? We all operate from the homeostasis kind of thing. My primitive brain is the one that says, relax, have a good time, just keep things safe and easy. We've done this forever. You're not in any danger. It's not like you're an alcoholic. Just have the cocktail. But the current, present, logical brain says, no, this is not serving me. So it was up to me to step out of my mind and those primitive thoughts and step into my calm, cool, collected, and brilliant human, modern thinking mind. Okay. Now, comparing ourselves to others and our drinking to another doesn't serve any of us because we have no idea what the motivations are for another person's alcohol consumption. Often we have a hard enough time coming to terms with our own motivations, thus the need for question number 1, why do I want to drink? So I've made the decision for myself that I do not want to use alcohol any longer as a buffer for negative feelings, for calming myself down, or any kind of coping mechanism. And the reason for that is simple. Because after spending hours and hours on my thought work around drinking and being fully present with my thoughts before I drink and after I drink, often at 2 a.m. or the next morning or whatever, I can clearly see that my drinking goal in some cases has been to reduce anxiety, cope better with challenges, and handle emotions. But that doesn't really align with the ultimate outcome because the reality of it is alcohol has never made me better. It's never made me more equipped to deal with a challenge or lessened my anxiety overall. And I will concede, kind of like drinking in high school, that it may have lessened my anxiety at that moment, but most often it created more anxiety, more stress, more negative thoughts and feelings and opinions about myself later in the day, later in the evening, or the next morning. And there have been a number of times it made me feel so much less anxious or better able to deal with the situation that I did act or speak in a way that's not truly congruent with how I feel or how I want to show up for others. I've hurt other people's feelings. I've embarrassed myself or someone else, and I've left myself feeling like I needed or wanted to apologize the next day. Now, as I mentioned, I haven't had a lot of drama. I haven't lost friendships. So it's not like this has happened regularly, but there have been those times where I've awakened the next morning thinking, I don't think I showed up as my best self, or thinking, I know I didn't show up as my best self. Is there anyone I need to apologize to today? And that's really not a great feeling. And then looking all of that from my modern, human, brilliant mind, it's not a choice I want to make for my goals, for my self-image, and my commitment to myself and to others. When I do choose to drink, I want it to always be from a place of happiness and joy and positive intentions, fully present and fully knowing how and why I feel the way that I do about alcohol and about my choice to drink in that moment and have an enhanced experience if that's how I choose to see it. Now, at this point in my life, I'm willing to say it's okay if that reason is a really expensive bottle of wine and I want to at least taste it, or I'm sharing it with someone who matters to me, or I'm in a beautiful setting where we're both fully present, we're happy and light, and we're not hashing out life's challenges. And even then, I know that alcohol is not a prerequisite to having a good time. And I've used that excuse so many times. Oh, it's happy hour. I want to be happy. Or everybody else is drinking. Or what are people going to think about me? I've learned that being fully present and not clouded by the veil of alcohol makes life's experiences so much better. And that really came to front and center for me when my little granddaughter was about 2 years old. When I thought to myself, I don't want her memory of me to be that I change as a person. I arrive on an airplane and within 30 minutes, we're having cocktails and then I become a different person to her. That was really, really important to me because I know from the research that I've done that kids often, little kids especially, don't understand the change that happens in adults when they drink. They observe it, they don't understand it. It can create a feeling of real unsafety for them. And I didn't want to be a cause of that. I want my experiences to matter and I want them to be memorable. And I will tell you, I cringe at the number of times thinking back on concerts with expensive tickets, holidays, and events over the years that are somewhat of a dull memory to me because of the amount of alcohol consumption that went along with it. Now, if this video has served you at all, I invite you to do a few things. Subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be sharing more on sex and alcohol and the myth of better sex with alcohol. I'll be talking about alcohol and sleep, weight loss or gain, and other people's opinions around your decision to cut back or completely quit alcohol and some tools that I've used to deal with that. You can grab the guide at throttlebackthebottle.com and begin to explore your own thoughts and relationship with alcohol. And leave me a comment below, if you will, if you're bold and brave, and if not, no judgment. Let me know what's gone on for you with alcohol. Give me a like. And just remember, comparison is often touted as the thief of joy, and alcohol can definitely be its accomplice, because it robs us of the joy that we truly can feel when we're fully present in a situation. I'm Jackie Elmer. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening to my story.